As the world is facing a deepening social, ecological, and geopolitical crisis, let's have a look at the main systemic driver that is very often ignored in the debate on seeking for solutions for all of this. Underlying this enormous crisis is one main fundamental drive that is, yes, like an elephant in the room, mostly ignored, and this is the monetary system that we have. So here is a presentation on the misrepresentation of money and why we should care, because this issue is absolutely fundamental. When we try to get a systemic understanding of economics, it is clear that money is the medium of economic exchange, so it affects all economic transactions. Money is incredibly important. It is arguably one of the most fundamental issues in global economics, but it is overwhelmingly ignored in theory, in textbooks, and actually misrepresented very often. Now, what is money? Is it a commodity or an abstract measure? When we look at history, there is this myth that money started with some kind of commodity that became a medium of exchange, and then later on there were more abstract measurements and credit and things like that. But as far as we know now, this is wrong. And in fact, the most early evidence that we have for money was that it started out as some abstract credit accounting. Right? So money was already very early in history a credit accounting system. But now, these days, we have proof with sound systems engineering science what money is and what it cannot be. Now, the formal proof boils down to this, that you can have a kilo of wheat or a kilo of gold, but you cannot have a kilo of kilos. So in effect, the measurement is an abstract entity that has no value in itself. It is just a mere record and measurement of value. Now this is very important, because now we know that money in essence is an abstract measurement system. But when you think about this means that money serves as an abstract measurement for the exchange of goods and services. So, for example, to charge interest on such a measurement is completely insane, right? Most what is legitimate is a kind of service cost for people who do the accounting or are keeping the records, so they can have a fee that reflects an honest cost and an honest reward for what they are doing. But the charging of interest and compounding interest on the measurement of our economic exchanges, that is absolutely completely insane. And this systemic error leads to systemic instability, continuous boom and bust cycles. It continuously inflates all value chains, and it accumulates wealth, it concentrates wealth with a very small minority to the detriment of the vast majority of the population, and to ecological well-being, as it forces the economy to grow exponentially. So in fact, this was already observed by Aristotle, that money Being naturally barren to make it breed money is preposterous and a perversion from the end of its institution, which was only to serve the purpose of exchange and not of increase. Men called bankers we shall hate, for they enrich themselves while doing nothing. So here is Aristotle already observing when these Greek oligarchies of bankers and of creditors were destroying Greek societies. Aristotle already observed that what they actually did was to pervert the medium of exchange into a medium for exploitation. And as we have seen, things like interest or compound interest on this are absolutely insane. Who would wish to do this except for exploitative reasons? But it is absolutely fraudulent and illegitimate. And here we are today, where economist Kenneth Galbraith observed that the study of money above all other fields in economics is one in which complexity is used to disguise truth or to evade truth, not to reveal it. The process by which banks create money is so simple that the mind is repelled. With something so important, a deeper mystery seems only decent. But in fact, the issue is quite straightforward and quite simple to understand. When money is just a measure of value of our economic exchanges with each other, then indeed it is a mere accounting system, money. So, in fact, it shouldn't surprise us that banks create money so easily, as they are just accounting, recording our exchanges. And this has also been proven. When Richard Werner in 2014 started to empirically investigate the banking system, and he asked the question, can banks create money out of nothing? And of course he found out that they do. Money is created as a mere double entry account, and when people pay back the credit, the sum is zero as it has been reciprocated. So here you see that the exchange of value is actually being recorded by banks, but as they misrepresent money as a certain thing with value in itself, now they argue that they can charge interest on this. But this is of course completely insane. It is ridiculous. But the consequences of this are enormous. Because what is effectively the result? Well, because the interest that banks charge on this credit debit account is not created, we are in a Ponzi scheme of in principle insoluble debt. And it is a Ponzi scheme because debt can never be repaid and need to be continuously new credit created with new interest and so on. So this drives an exponential economic growth imperative, drives deepening inequalities as it concentrates wealth and power with the richest 10%. So the global banking system, by money's misrepresentation based on fraud, is antisocial, anti-ecological, and anti-economical by design. Antisocial because we can observe empirically that interest only provides a net interest to the 10% richest people in society. So by defrauding money, by misrepresenting money, banks are actually just political institutions of the rich. Well, actually political, even criminal arguably, because all they do is to pervert credit and the accounting of our economic exchanges to create a cash flow from the vast majority of the population to the richest 10%. Now, the results in global wealth distribution are of course obvious. The wealth distribution resulting is absolutely insane. And as 30% of global deaths are of poverty-related causes, this is also is arguably a structural genocide. Now we know that poverty and overpopulation are closely related because it is poor people who have many, many children to make them economically more secure. So creating a world that is more fair and evenly distributed is very, very important to come to a sustainable population with a good quality of life. But this is made impossible by this institutionalized kleptocracy that the global banking system actually turns out to be. So the UN observes that a world of debt is a growing burden to global prosperity. But these people who are so closely related to the World Bank and the IMF, they are of course part of the problem. They are part of the fraud and the deception that has caused all of this. So here we see, yes, it's a never-ending growing of debt and interest payments. And the tragedy, of course, is that the poorest countries pay the highest burden. So this is a kind of crime that is absolutely stunning when you think about it, the results of it. But it's also anti-ecological because already Sumerian scholars knew that compounding interest is unsustainable, and that was why they have these periodic debt cancellations or underarm. But from Greek and Roman predatory creditor classes, they refused to cancel these debts that were exponentially compounding and burdening people. So we see a complete devastation of societies since creditors were completely unleashed. And as we have already seen, all of this is based on fraud and on a misrepresentation of money. So what Aristotle already observed, we have now systems theoretical proof of this. As decoupling is a dangerous fairy tale, and as more GDP and more economic activity and extraction and resource and energy use always leads to more ecological damage. It's simple law of thermodynamics already. But we know that we are already overshooting planetary boundaries seriously. So what needs to be done is a decrease of production and consumption and much better distribution, of course. And if we are really serious about this and we see how we are transgressing planetary boundaries, critical boundaries, well, it is just an existential necessity. Moreover, this instability, economic instability, also puts great powers against each other, and we are now at risk for a third world war. United States is a heavily indebted country, so everybody is fighting to get ahead in the game, a game that has been set up as absolutely impossible. So yeah, the situation is dramatic actually, but as we have seen, we can solve it by correcting money's misrepresentation. So indeed, degrowth is an existential necessity, but it's the global banking system that makes it primarily structurally impossible. In fact, it is a system that is programmed for ecocide and genocide. And that is of course also what is observed by UN rapporteur Professor Olivier de Schutter when he says we're basically killing the planet only to enrich elites. So the situation is absolutely, yeah, devastating for the moment. And unless we learn this and we learn what has been done to us, uh, we cannot solve this problem, and we should solve this problem. And there is, of course, many political corruption in it. And it is not only a case of conspiracy, of course, it is also a case of class dominance and class opportunism. And quite frankly, I think many bankers or people in the top 10 richest percent of the population, they have no idea about what they are doing, in fact. But the system has been set up as an actual conspiracy, and this has been documented by historian Carroll Quigley when he notices that the powers of financial capitalism had a far-reaching aim to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. So you can see this as an opportunistic business scam, but as we have seen, it has dire consequences. And of course, the result is that we have a global capitalist system that is absolutely dominated by the banking system and corporations. And the misrepresentation of money is what has enabled this enormous concentration of wealth and power systemically that is absolutely unsustainable. This system is a killing machine, right? We need to get rid of this. And from a systems perspective, to get rid of this is to change the function of the system. And if we know that money is misrepresented and it is functioning fraudulently and actually dysfunctioning for society, yes, then this is of course an absolute priority to solve. This must be obvious. So we are just facing the consequences of the institutionalization of murderous greed. And I think it is terrible that in academia people are still brainwashed into things about money that simply are not true. And this, of course, obstructs the search for systemic solutions. And it is really urgently needed that we solve this problem. So thank you for your kind attention.